is item C, which is resolution 2025-61, which is the 79E modification for 31 Myrtle Street, which is scheduled for a public hearing. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Bates.
If it please.
Or
Yeah.
that was tabled, so we have to bring it off the table if we're gonna go to that.
Okay, before,
Motion to remove it from the table.
Second.
okay. Ms. Bizarro, when we get a,
Who was second?
assistant mayor.
Limoges. Councilor
Councilor
Limoges.
Limoges was second. Thank you.
Counselor Klosky,
Yes.
Counselor Greenrose,
Yes.
Counselor Limoges,
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Metow,
Yes.
Counselor Suter,
Yes.
Counselor Hemingway,
Yes.
Counselor O'Hearn.
Yes.
Mayor Gerard.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
If it pleases the council, I'd like to go to the table to the city planner and the city assessor on this matter.
Okay, if you folks would like to join us. Good evening, Mr. Ford and Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again on this.
Okay.
As you know, we had a public hearing for the modification of covenant for 31 Myrtle Street at our last meeting. And we requested additional information. I feel as if this meeting will be enlightening and reach a good resolution. I would be happy to provide information about the process and the information provided. I'll be also representative for the assessment department to shed light on the process after it leaves the department and council. So just a reminder, according to RSA 79E9, during public hearing, the council shall determine whether and to what extent the public benefit of the project has been diminished, and shall further determine whether to terminate or reduce the tax relief period in accordance with such determination.
Questions for Mr. Hamilton or Mr. Ford before we continue? Councilor Hemingway.
I would mind hearing the process
Okay,
before we continue, if everyone agrees.
Thirdly, where would you like to start in the process? Beginning? So when somebody is interested in developing a property in the eligible district, which includes the historic district and any of the city center zoning districts, they have the opportunity to apply for 79E revitalization tax relief through the application. You have an application provided. I received those applications at. Do you have a question?
if the mic just doesn't seem to be picking up your voice, that's why.
Can you hear me better now, or should I just use, oh, that sounds a lot better.
Yes, thank you.
I noticed I sounded a little quiet. So we receive these applications in the planning and development department, work with applicants to make sure that the applications are submitted completely, answer any questions that they might have about the process, gather information, and then provide it to the council for the public hearing to determine the public benefit. At that time, the council schedules a public hearing. I believe it has to be within 60 days. It comes to you and you determine that public benefit and make pass a resolution to accept that. At that time, you determine a few things. One is the amount of years that you want to grant that benefit for, the time period, and ask any additional questions to the applicant. After you make that determination, most of the rest of the process passes off to the assessment department. And if you'd like to take it from here.
Sure. The process is to determine what the benefit of the 79E assessment would be. If the applicant follows through with the covenant as defined in the resolution. And so these don't become effective until the covenant is signed, and then all of the terms of the covenant are met. And then the process is to continue the assessment of a prior value while the period of benefit determined by the council exists. And That's the standard process. When we get to the end of the benefit period, then the value will revert to the then highest and best use value of the property, similar to every other property in the community. That can become a staggered and a difficult process if a person doesn't execute the development in accordance with the covenant. And that certainly appears to have happened in the case of this property, where the council approved the resolution and a covenant was drafted and executed. And according to the terms of the covenant, it hasn't been completed per the required terms.
Assistant Mayor Matto.
So in this case, but the property we're talking about tonight, it was 2021 when this started. And there was a deadline,
2020. actually.
2020, okay. And then 2021 was the deadline for finishing the project, which did not happen. But also what appears to have not happened is it being reassessed when the whole city was reassessed, and reassessed over the last 2 years since the project has been completed for 2 years, according to when the owner was here last council meeting. He said the bulk of the project was completed about 2 years ago. So the assessing records don't seem to reflect that. And I'm just curious as to why.
We don't go out and observe every single property in the city every single year on April 1st. And so we have systems in place to make sure that we're aware of properties that are under construction and receiving building permits and getting inspections and occupancy certificates. And for whatever reason, we were not receiving them on this property. We did establish two things. One would be a value for the property at the end of the completion of the project. And the second was the value that we determined appropriate at the beginning of the project. Of course, the way that 79E works is that you get a locked in value from before you have signed the covenant, but not until after you complete the construction. So the assessment that we had on the property reflected what our belief was of the value on April 1st of then 2021, and then the subsequent April 1st as it moved along. In that process, a revaluation was completed by Vision Appraisal. They revalued all of the property. They did not change the value on this property either. I'm assuming it's because our understanding and their understanding was that there was no completion of construction through that time frame.
Questions? Councilor Hemingway.
So back in 1819 timeframe, the property was, I think, assessed.
1819, I was
2018, 2019. Yeah, we'll come to the century. Okay, that's fine. The property, I believe, was well over 100,000, but then it dropped down to like 53. Second part of that question would be, is the assessed value on the building and the property, or just the building?
So the assessed value reflects the total value, total taxable value. And I think the number was 73,500 at the beginning. Yeah. With completion of the construction for this year, which we've become aware of now, that will change the value for the final notice of tax for 2025.
Counselor Hemingway.
But my understanding is not complete because a third apartment is not finished.
Whatever the state of completion is, and that's the challenge with coming up with the value, which can be a very much a moving target from year to year, especially on a property that has been substantially demolished on the interior and then at some point, at various points, reconstructed without our ability to see that that work was ongoing or being completed.
Mr. Ford, I think you had an answer you wanted to give.
I do. Please note that the applicant has now, after this first discussion, applied for a certificate of occupancy for that third unit. I think that there was a miscommunication maybe several years ago about the requirement for that as part of the 79E process.
Yeah, I'll yield.
Counselor Kolosky.
Is the applicant present this evening?
The applicant is not present this evening.
Counselor Kolosky.
So you said a certificate of occupancy was requested. Has that been granted at this point?
It has, thank you. It has passed through, I believe, most of its reviews. I don't believe it has been issued yet, although I may be wrong. I can check. It is in the process of review by the proper city departments.
Assistant Mayor Matto.
So again, when the applicant was here at the last meeting, he stated it's been about 2 years since he's been substantially or mostly complete with the exception of the CO for that third unit. He's been living there. So am I led to believe that the reason why it has been reassessed April 1 of 2024 or April 1 of 2025 is because the applicant didn't gain or request the proper building permits, which would have triggered that review?
We received no copies of those types of building permits that do automatically trigger a visit to the property. And so we're
So
somewhat
when you
blind.
say you received none, does that mean, Austin, that there were none applied for?
The history of the building permits and other permits on this property is something that I can provide insight to based on what I found. I obviously wasn't present to receive these. I don't know if all of the required permits were issued, as I also haven't visited the property or become aware of the specific work that was done. So my answer to you is perhaps.
Follow up, please.
Assistant Mayor Matto.
So the applicant stated that they invested $200,000 into this building. And was there permits pulled? That's a substantial amount of work. And you have the files. And this was since 2020. So I would assume, because the assessor doesn't have anything, that there wasn't much applied for.
That's
Can't
correct.
find-
There is some,
That-
yes, there's some problem with the history of the permits.
Counselor Hemingway.
So when the property was purchased, there was a lead abatement or do not occupy unless you're owner occupied. So that meant that only the owner could occupy that building and would have to get a CO for the apartment. He was the second apartment, or the first apartment, because his residence, the first apartment, before anyone moved in. I'm assuming that someone's living there. Did he get a CO for that first apartment?
Not to my knowledge. Again, this is a property of which the details I became aware of rather recently. I would love to provide more insight as to the details of the history of this property and its permits and its certificate of occupancy. However, I would like to suggest that the council's public hearing, although I think all of these are important questions and this is an important discussion, eventually determine whether and to what extent the public benefit of the project has been diminished and further determine whether to terminate or reduce the tax relief benefit in accordance with such determination.
We do appreciate your opinion, but
Thank you.
we'll continue on our discussion. Thank you for offering that, though. Counselor Kolosky.
So I can go back to the days where, you know, council has inquired about this property and I know we've changed a lot of hands here. So inspectors, city planners, planning director. So I really feel that the ball was dropped, you know, 50-50 on this property. I believe in being fair. This is one that's popped up repeatedly and it's listed in every document that we get. Every time we get another 79E application before us, we as the city have ample time to address this, and I don't think we did. I'm to understand currently the third unit has a certificate of occupancy issued on it. So that that checks off that box. I didn't fully understand this actual resolution before us, and I did reach out to the mayor to say that because the way it reads, it's giving us direction of what the action would be tonight. And then where you get down to whether to terminate or reduce the tax relief, the actual resolution itself is just to terminate. So I'm not quite sure even how to proceed this evening, even based on that, because what's posted to the public is listed as the termination, not us deciding if we're going to adjust what that is. My personal opinion is we start from now and apply a timeline that the 79E is valid. That's what I would like to see. But if you think that we move forward, the legal way to clean this up is to terminate this and ask the applicant to come back forward and reapply. If we need to do that, that's fine. But I fully believe, in my opinion, I was there for the site, the walkthrough that was open to the public. I wasn't even a planning board member at the time. I was there for the actual physical walkthrough of the property, looking at the property, looking at the city's direction on it, what was going to happen. So the city and inspectors have had a lot of hands-on experience through the years on the property. So I just, with this particular one, I would like us to approach this in a fair manner and make an adjustment and not just terminate, but that's me.
Assistant Mayor Matto.
So I understand where Councilor Kolosky is coming from, and I want to be fair too. However, this project's been going on for 4 years now. We've had 4 opportunities to increase the assessment. Everyone that owned a multifamily house in Claremont got hit incredibly hard a few years ago. This one went down. 2 years ago, the owner said he was finished with a $200,000 plus project, yet his tax rate is still assessed at 73.5. So in my opinion, he's already gotten 3 years of tax relief, even though it never went through the proper channels. The bigger thing is that he knew, he sits on the planning board, the owner. He knew he needed to pull permits. Had he done the permitting process properly, we would not be having this discussion. The assessor would have gotten the paperwork. This would have all gone through the process. I'm sure the fact that he was a little bit late would have been overlooked by us, and we wouldn't have an issue with that. I have an issue with the fact that permits weren't pulled. Therefore, our assessing process didn't get to happen the way it was supposed to. And he's been sitting on a $73,000 assessment, which was an assessment for a building that was under construction. It's been done for 2 years. So he shouldn't have, even if he should have gone to the before the construction started, amount of 100,000, not 73,000. So he's already gotten considerable tax relief by virtue of not pulling permits. And I think at this point, he should get assessed for April 1 of 2025, and we should call this a wash.
Mr. Ford, did you have a?
Just want to make sure that I'm responding to questions as they come up, and if I've made it seem like I believe that this process was done correctly on either side, I apologize. I agree with you. I think that it's very clear that this process was done incorrectly. Many parts of it, if not most. I've highlighted some additional ways in which the ball was dropped. I think that obviously we've learned a lot about the 79E process just in the past few months. And we strive to not make the mistakes that we did before. For instance, I don't think that the April 1st deadline was even discussed at the council meeting. I provided the minutes. So much of this didn't work. So I'm glad we can arrive at that baseline. And I hope it didn't seem like I was trying to imply that it was done correctly. And I provided the resolution for termination just because a document was requested of me, and that was the one. It is in no way a suggestion or a requirement or a recommendation of the action that the council should take.
Councilor Loesch.
One concern that I have is that if we let this go, I mean, it was setting a precedent. And I'm afraid that, you know, somebody else gets into it. They're gonna say, well, look at this, that was let go too. So I tend to agree with Assistant Mayor Mattow on this. Just to terminate it and go from here.
Would you guys mind if I
Right
add a
ahead.
couple things in? Earlier today, Councilor Hemingway and I were having a discussion under section 79E13, item 1A. It talks about how the substantial rehabilitation performed under the conditions approved is not part of the reassessment, but then it goes on to say, and not to those increases attributable to other factors included, but not limited to market forces. Wouldn't the market forces be the overall increases in value that our community received during the recent assessments? Wouldn't they be seeing that even?
So during the construction phase, it's the condition and market forces that apply to the building. And through those tax years, our belief, not having received any certificates of occupancy or building permits that describe the, now I'm hearing $200,000 that was spent on the renovation. Without any of that, we had what we knew at the beginning of the process. So with those blinders on, we had the value that we had, and the revaluation company didn't look at it any differently than the assessing department did. So there may have been an opportunity in the interim, if we had been tracking through what year those improvements were made and what impact did it have on the value for that particular tax year. For now, for 2025, if there is no longer a 79E on the property, it will go to the full value for the December tax bill. The June bill that was sent out is just a prepayment on what that final liability will be. So it in no way limits the city now from assessing the full value for 2025.
Okay. And at the last meeting, when the applicant was here, the question was asked of him how much investment he had made in, and I thought he was going to provide that information. I don't see anything in our packet for that type of information this evening.
I received that information, but it was after the packet was sent to the council. It came in late, and so I wasn't able to provide it.
Okay. And the last thing before I yield the floor here is I agree with what Councilor Kolosky said, that there was definitely errors on both sides, probably from this standpoint. But in a sense, this applicant was able to receive 4 years worth of reduced values, didn't follow the process properly. So I truly think that we need to terminate the resolution personally, just because I think that he, and again, I know that the comment was have him reapply. Well, reapplication at this point would be going by what the value is of the home today. And if he's already completed, I'm not sure that's really going to change anything at this point either. So Councilor Hemingway.
I'm gonna go with a different spin. So on the application, okay, let me go this way. I have a couple of questions if that's okay. The 79E process states that it can be used for properties within a historic district or areas designated for 79E. Can a property that is not within the historic district, because this one is not, be pegged as 79E. Eligible.
Yes, because the city expanded the eligible area.
The council at one point had drawn the lines of what the 79E area was, and that was inclusive of the property.
Because
So-
currently it is not included in that area. I pulled up the map today. And currently it is not in that area.
The historic district or the 79E?
The historic district.
Yeah, but it's,
79E is, but. the
which
historic
is,
district.
which is what the council approved at one point.
I'll revert, yeah, 79E, the historic district is not, so you got a credit for the historic district. But the property is not within the historic district.
So the applicant got credit for the rehabilitation of a historic building, which is separate from the eligible area. That wasn't area based, to my knowledge. This was the Ball House, a historically significant building. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, I believe. But again, the eligibility of this.
So the.
Counselor Hemingway, do you have another
Yes, I
question?
do, sorry. Follow up. So the eligibility on that, according to the National Registry, was May of 21. There's a letter in there from the Claremont Historic District Chair that says that they had not had the opportunity to look at this property to determine whether it was a valuable asset in a historic piece. It's in there from.
Sure.
It's the Messier.
Yes, so. Two. Right here. Dated September 29, 2020. To DeForest Burrs. The Historic District Commission has not formally met to discuss the historical significance of the house at 37 Myrtle Street. I'm sure it means 31. But I offer the following opinion. It was the home of Albert Ball, mechanical engineer, Sullivan County, blah, blah, blah. And down at the bottom, it said, Mr. Ball's home is a reflection of his importance, and every assistance should be granted in support of his preservation. However, it wasn't on our books, and it wasn't on the state books.
So if I may, Counselor Hemingway, if you've identified that the property is not eligible, then you've identified another way in which the city council improperly handled this 79E. So it's possible, but it's kind of adding to the list.
One more, if I may.
Counselor Hemingway.
The only reason really is I went and started looking for this house, pulled up the Google search, and I got it. Eagle Times had 5 properties that were listed, and this was one of them. That was May 21, May of 2021. However, on his application, he also marked down that this was an historic yard. I don't know if you remember if you put it with historic district, but it was a historical piece that was eligible for historic. If you look at his application. So, and then he also stated that he was going to finish in October 15th to 21 on that as well.
Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit correctly.
Sister Mary Matto.
So if we make a resolution to terminate, it speaks of having to pay back the relief that's been granted. And even though it technically hasn't been granted, he has gotten relief over the last 4 years. So he will not have to, we will not go back and change his assessment prior to April 1 of 25. Is that correct, Assessor?
I don't believe we would have the opportunity to do that. We would have the opportunity to move forward with an April 1st of 2025 full value on the property. But because the terms of the covenant were never met, and we didn't make the the covenant value, the assessment of the property through the process, we were relying on the physical condition of the property when it went into this process. It never would have gotten to the point where we were assigning the covenant value to it until he had completed the construction. And I think if you terminate the resolution at this point, that terminates the covenant, and it leaves the property with a full value for 2025.
Thank you.
Counselor Kowalski, Counselor Greenrose. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yep.
After listening to all of this and realizing that there were, and I'll just call them issues on both sides, I think Assistant Mayor Mattau's solution makes sense. We got 4 years of tax relief. We're not going to penalize them by trying to go after them for back, I guess the best way to call them. And it's a learning experience, and hopefully I think my question would be, what processes have we implemented since this occurred so that it doesn't happen again? It's in the past. I don't want to dwell on it. I just don't want it to happen again.
I believe Mr. Ford has addressed that the last few 79Es when he's come forward, and Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Ford, and I know Ms. Bates have all worked closely to come up with a process, so that way it's being monitored on a pretty routine basis at this point. And I think Ms. Bates said today when we were speaking that each October when she does forms for DRA, she has to, or the auditor, that you have to figure out what 79Es you have available, and she's going to start to hand that information over to council at that point in the fall as well. Councilor Greenrose?
Follow up.
Absolutely.
So is that formalized, that an actual process of procedure we've got now? Because while I trust everybody currently in the room, 5 years from now, it may be a completely different mix. People may not remember what that process was. So has this been proceduralized, or is it going to be?
I'm going to pass this one off to Ms. Bates. She's got her hands up. She's going to come over to a mic so people can hear her. Thank you.
Yes, so we have plans of making this a standard operating procedure for the city.
Thank you.
Councilor Kowalski.
So after hearing, other feedback, I think it is correct. They've been afforded the luxury of not paying like what it should have been. So I'm fine with the termination of this, but I just want to be careful in a few areas, because some of the stuff that is stated might not be exactly accurate, including the pulling of building permits. I can't tell you that what sits in the file, but and I hope City Manager Bates hears this. I asked before about our ability to close out permits and follow up in a timely manner, and that information being passed along to the assessing office over the years. I think that has lagged. This highlights that to me. I had a gentleman call me. I believe he's spoken with the mayor as well at one point, and asking questions about individual properties that building permits or projects have been completed, and then he saw his value go up, but the other properties do not. And it's been substantial amount of time. So that was a concern. That just raises another red flag to me. I've had a couple contractors state that they have open building permits that they haven't closed out. So I'm not sure if we have a backlog or some from prior projects. But I will tell you, when we're talking about the actual eligibility of the property, the council by resolution 2019-8 changed that. And there was a lengthy conversation when Charlene Lovett was mayor, and it had to do with Broad Street properties and which properties that we wanted to go after and the eligibility. It changes it. And in that resolution, it actually indicates the map number that you would look at, and it reflects city center zoning. There's actually two options there, and it tells you the map number for the historic district map that you'd look at, or the city center zoning map, which is actually included in the ordinance, that map, which is a very large area of downtown. So it would have been eligible. I just personally have a problem thinking that if no permits were pulled whatsoever. This was a prominent project in the middle of the city with staging outside, painting, scraping, work going on. The planning board physically walked the property, and then we find out or hear no building permits. So again, I guess shame on us for not going out there if no building permits were pulled. And again, it's no current staff here. But something fell through the cracks, and I know we have systems in place now, but I have a hard time believing that no building permits were pulled. Or somebody would have drove by and stopped work.
I think Mr. Ford would like to answer that question.
Yes, imagine my shock to find out the situation with the building permits as someone who cares deeply about getting permits out promptly to contractors. I do want to address your initial comments about the speed at which permits are approved and if we have a backlog. I do believe that a large part of this happened during transition between staff members, and I do think that something major fell through the cracks with permits. This is something that I've looked into in detail to make sure that past permits are not sitting in limbo with people not being notified or problems. I do want to note that our building permits are actually public and searchable. It's not necessarily publicly known or easy to access, but that's something that I want to fix. So I did confirm this recently, although I usually operate on the internal side. I popped out of that login to make sure that it was still searchable, but we're looking into ways to make that more public. And so if there are concerns with timelines of building permits, that information is available.
Counselor Hemingway, then I'll come back to Counselor Pulaski.
I corrected myself on the 79E portion as far as the expanded map. The historic district part was not in that, and to my recollection, from my discovery was, it wasn't on anybody's role to be entered into the historic district part as an asset. And he clicked off that it was eligible. And all he needed really was a letter from the commission, the Historic Society, saying, yes, this is a significant item and he's going to apply. But that letter definitely said he hadn't had the opportunity to look at it. And it didn't get validated until May of 21. So I just feel that with a person that's both on the planning board, a contractor, that he would go through these processes and I don't want to say defraud the public, but
At this point, again, I do appreciate your thoughts. I would like to at this point, we've gone back and forth about what the do's and don'ts or what did happen, didn't happen. I think honestly, at this point, we need to make up our decision whether because I don't think we're getting any new information out here. So I'd really like to either make a motion or resolution to read the resolution, or we decide that we're going to continue along the path and see how things go at this point. So, Mr. Ford, you have this perplexed look on your face.
No response. I think that's a good plan.
Okay. Counselor Klosky.
I just wanted to clear up so there's no confusion. I don't think there's any issue or backlog in issuing building permits. It's the closing out of those and then passing along the information to the assessing office to do a visit. I've heard that repeatedly over the years, and I thought it was fixed, and I want to make sure that it is.
I will gladly double check. Yeah.
Would anybody be willing to read the resolution or make a decision that we're not going to do anything with this? Counselor Hemingway.
as soon as I find it, that's the
2025-61.
Resolution 2025-61, termination of RSA 79E, Community Revitalization Tax Relief Incentive for substantial rehabilitation of 31 Myrtle Street. Be resolved by the Claremont City Council after public hearing duly noticed that whereas on September 18, 2020, the city received an application from Jonathan Nelson and Berkeley Heath seeking property tax relief under the provisions of RSA 79E as an incentive for substantial rehabilitation for property located at 31 Myrtle Street. And whereas on October 28, 2020, the city council passed resolution 2021-19 approving application for tax relief for a period of 7 years per RSA 79E:5, Roman numeral 1, commencing upon the completion of the substantial rehabilitation of the property as evidenced by the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And whereas the granting of this community tax relief incentive was subject to the granting by Jonathan Nelson and Berkeley Heath of a covenant acceptable to legal counsel in accordance with RSA 79E:8, ensuring that the property shall be maintained and used in a manner that furthers the public benefits for which the tax relief was granted, and such other requirements as are set forth in resolution 2021-3. And whereas pursuant to RSA 79E:9, if a grantor fails to abide by the terms of the covenant or otherwise fails to maintain or utilize the property and any structures thereon in accordance with the and to what extent the public benefit of the project has been diminished and shall further determine whether to terminate or reduce the tax relief period for in accordance with which the termination. And whereas if the covenant is terminated for any reason, the city shall assess all current and arrears taxes to the owner as though no tax relief was granted, with interest in accordance with RSA Chapter 75. And whereas in accordance with RSA 79E:9, the city council has properly determined that the public benefit of the project has been diminished, and further determination whether to terminate or reduce the tax relief period in accordance with such determination. Now therefore be it resolved, the city council hereby determines that the grantor has failed to abide by the terms of the covenant, and be it further resolved that the city council hereby terminates the tax relief granted under resolution 2021-19, and be it further resolved the city manager and or his designees are hereby authorized to execute all documents and undertake all actions as may be required to implement this resolution. Dated this 23rd day of July, 2025, city of Claremont, county of Sullivan, state of New Hampshire.
Second.
Further discussion? Counselor O'Hearn?
I would only say that the counselor missed one line on the project documents, and the city council shall, after duly notice public hearing, determine whether and you got tied up on the cord and then you jumped over that line.
Are you good with the additional?
Yes.
Yes.
You're good with the
Yes.
additional? Thank you.
Here's a start over.
Okay, please. Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'd like to open this up for a public hearing to see if the public would like to speak on resolution 2025-61, the 79E modification for 31 Myrtle Street. Anybody like to speak on that? Seeing nobody, I'd like to close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. One last chance. Any further questions? Counselor Hemingway.
I just have one thought. Within his, and I don't know, with the lead abatement, who goes in and double checks to make sure the lead abatement and everything that was supposed to be done is done? Because within it, he said he's gonna pull up 6 inches of earth, remove sidewalks because of all the scraping and everything. The lead abatement, that was part of the lead abatement, is to remove the earth around the house 6 inches deep.
Counselor Hemingway, I do appreciate that, but that'll be something that the planning department will address as part of their processes. Because again, from the council standpoint, this is really outside of our limits at this point. So anything else? Seeing it's been a nice lively discussion. Ms. Pizarro, could we get a roll call, please?
Counselor Klosky.
Yes.
Counselor Greenrose.
Yes.
Counselor Limoges.
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Mattow.
Yes.
Counselor Zuder.
No.
Counselor Hemingway.
Yes.
Counselor O'Hearn.
Yes.
Mayor Gerard.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. We're on to resolution 2026